Vamos lá para mais um vídeo que vocês mandaram. Eu, Alexio, que mandou pra gente JOJO The Raven Plan. Sei lá, isso é assim que fala. Do Ramon Beach. Eu esqueci o nome dele, mas vamos lá.
She's up
Tá
there!
em
I'm
inglês.
on the beat!
Tá em inglês. Alto essa porra.
In part 6 of JoJo.
Peraí, deixa eu ver se eu coloco em português. Será que em português fica melhor? Opa. Ok, acho que vai.
JoJo's bizarre adventure, Poochie's goal was to carry out the last will of his master, Dio. This was to bring the world to a state of what Dio called heaven. The complicated nature of this plan leaves some people confused, and some often write it off as totally nonsensical. In this video, I will be going over what heaven is, and the process of attaining it, both as it was planned, and as it occurred in the story. In one of my previous videos, I went in-depth on the concept of fate, which has existed as an observable force in the world of JoJo ever since the very first part. Understanding the concept of fate is absolutely integral to understanding the Heaven Plan, along with the motivations of Poochie and Dio. I will retread some of that information in this video, but I still recommend watching my Fate video, since there I also delve into its presence in other parts. Before we can understand heaven, we must first understand the one who came up with it, Dio. Dio Brando was born into poverty, and suffered through an abusive lifestyle. This molded him into a manipulator, who planned to infiltrate the Joestar family and steal their wealth. His ambition was so great that he rejected his own humanity, and shifted his goal to that of world domination. He was eventually defeated by Jonathan Joestar and sealed away for 100 years. During his time in the coffin, Dio had plenty of time to think over his mistakes. It is at this point that I believe he reached an understanding of fate, and formed his heaven philosophy that would govern his actions from there onward. Dio's idea of heaven is a state of being in which you are completely aware of your own fate, and have no power to change it. You know everything that will happen to you for your entire life. Dio seems to be a person who is cursed by fate. From the start, he was fated to be born into a tragic life, in which his mother dies and his father abuses him. Because of this, the ideal state for someone with a tumultuous life like Dio is a world in which he is completely aware of his own fate, and then comes to accept it. Once you have accepted this fate, you have reached the peace of mind that Dio calls heaven. Unlike most stories, in which fate is an abstract concept, the fate in JoJo is an observable, physical truth. The force known as fate is actually the force of gravity itself. All mass has a gravitational pull, and these various pulls is what influences and carries out the fated path. All people and objects are governed by it, and while some may believe they are altering fate, in reality the changing of fate itself is fated. Fate is completely inescapable. Anyone who tries to overcome it will eventually be shot down by it. The only way to thrive within the system of fate is to completely accept it. It would become Dio's goal for the entire world to face this truth, whether they wish to or not. Now that we hopefully understand the concepts of heaven and fate, how exactly will Dio reach this goal? This is where the Heaven Plan comes in. In order for heaven to be attained, the universe must be accelerated to the singularity point. By doing this, the universe will be reborn. People will have already witnessed their entire existence, and will now be placed back into it with foreknowledge of it. Once they know their own unchangeable fate, they can start to internally come to terms with it. With Dio's current stand the world, this goal is not possible. The world has control over time, and Dio likely understood another truth, which is that the law of gravity and the flow of time are intertwined. And as we already know, gravity and fate are intertwined as well. As a time-manipulating stand, the world is the first step to creating the stand necessary for heaven. However, Dio already had his stand, and that couldn't be changed. So he devised a ritual, in which he could force this stand to become the one of his choosing. Dio's plan
Ué. Bom dia, YouTube. Bom dia.
to attain heaven is as follows. He begins by inscribing the 14 phrases into the
Nossa
stand.
senhora, paredão de texto. Muito bom.
A stand is synonymous with one's soul, and by inscribing these phrases, he is ingraining them into his soul itself. This will act as a kind of password for later. Then, he would destroy his own stand. Dio's will would be revived through his remaining bone, and by sacrificing the souls of 36 sinners, create a homunculus known as the Green Baby. By inscribing his soul with the 14 phrases, he not only implants those phrases into the Green Baby, but also implants it with his wish for it to be capable of reaching heaven. The baby is essentially Dio's will to attain heaven given form. Through the exchange of the power of 36 souls, Dio's inscribed soul is reborn in the way he chooses. The baby would be sought out by someone that Dio trusts, and this person would relay the 14 phrases to them, confirming their identity. The baby would then fuse with this person, implanting Dio's will to attain heaven into the person's stand. This would cause the stand to become Sea-Moon, the one needed for the plan. With this gravity manipulation stand, the person would need to head to specific coordinates on Earth. These coordinates point to Cape Canaveral, where the gravitational pull of the Earth is at its weakest. The other major gravitational factor accounted for is the phase of the moon. According to the plan, it must be a new moon. Once reaching these coordinates, Sea-Moon will be able to manipulate gravity in such a way that time itself will be affected, since, once again, time and gravity are intertwined. Once this happens, the stand will evolve into Made in Heaven. This stand can accelerate time until the universe reaches the singularity point. When this happens, a new universe is created. All living creatures experience a full cycle of the universe and are then placed back into an identical universe. Now that they know their own fate and that it is futile to try and alter it, they can begin to come to terms with it. Once someone has understood that their fate is absolute and accepts it, they will attain the peace of mind Dio spoke about, and reach the state of enlightenment known as heaven. As we know, gravity and fate are one and the same. Because of this, Made in Heaven has true control over fate in this new universe. The universe could be played from the beginning, allowing a full cycle to take place within this heaven effect. I believe this is what Dio's ultimate goal was, for all living beings to live within this idea of heaven. However, in practice, Dio's plan did not go completely as intended. Now that we've gone over the intended plan, we'll look at how these events actually played out in the story, since it deviates from the plan in a few key ways. After being freed from the coffin, Dio would meet with the fortune teller Enya, who would teach him about stands. She would also supplement whatever he already understood about fate. Enya had come into possession of 5 stand arrows, and Dio would use these to give himself and many others the ability to use a stand. Dio's own stand proved incapable of carrying out the heaven plan on its own, so Dio would travel the world seeking out other stand users. He would eventually be drawn to Pucci, and with his white snake, the plan would be expedited. After repeated visits with him, Dio began to trust Pucci enough to designate him as the person needed for this plan. He gave Pucci one of his bones, in order to revive his soul after the destruction of his stand. He then sent Pucci to Florida to infiltrate the staff of the Green Dolphin Street prison. Once he had gotten considerable influence in the prison, he would be able to arrange for the needed sacrifice. However, this would take some time. Meanwhile, Dio would search for more stand users. He would still need a stand that could revive his body, and I think it's possible that the Nijimura father's stand was a candidate for this, due to its possible regenerative properties. He was also sought out for his proximity to Jotaro Kujo. Keicho Nijimura suspected that Dio was searching for a certain type of stand, although Keicho was unaware of what exactly this stand was. Next, Dio would inscribe the 14 phrases onto his stand, and prepare for his stand's eventual destruction. Dio would then write his plan into his diary, planning to relay this all to Pucci in the near future. However, the events of Part 3 would eventually occur, causing Jotaro Kujo to pursue Dio. With his understanding of fate, Dio knows that he is destined to clash with the Joestars, and decides that they need to be dealt with in order for them not to interfere with the remaining preparations for the plan. Of course, Dio would be defeated by Jotaro and his body destroyed. While Dio's death is a necessary step in the plan, it had come at an unintended time. To further complicate matters, Jotaro located Dio's diary and learned about the plan to attain heaven. The diary was then destroyed, making Jotaro the only person in the world with knowledge of the plan. The plan was nearly devastated by this setback, but the involvement of Pucci would end up saving it. Pucci's stand Whitesnake acts as a plan B. In the event that knowledge of the plan is lost, he can seek out and recover the memories of it. Pucci would spend the next few decades rising through the ranks of the prison and locating the necessary stands. He gathered a large amount of stand discs, one of which was Limp Bizkit, a stand capable of reviving the bone of Dio. After a long period of waiting, Pucci finally recognized Jotaro's weakness through his daughter Jolene. Using Jangali A, one of Dio's remaining disciples, he would frame Jolene for murder and have her sent to the prison. This caused Jotaro to attempt a rescue, at which point he was able to catch him off guard and steal his stand and memory discs. Now that he had the memory disc, he had full knowledge of the plan. Jolene was no longer a concern of Pucci, so he would make no personal attempt to stop her escape with Jotaro's comatose body. However, Jolene chose to stay in the prison to get the discs back from Pucci. With Limp Bizkit, Dio's bone was given life, and sought out the souls of the prisoners in the punishment ward, creating the Green Baby. Pucci was able to locate the baby and say the 14 phrases he had learned from the disc, fusing the baby with him and giving him the proper stand. Pucci left the prison and headed towards Cape Canaveral, although he would still have to wait for the new moon, giving Jolene time to catch up. Since the Green Baby was technically a combination of Dio and Jonathan's body, it had a Joestar birthmark. After fusing with it, this gave Pucci the birthmark, and also altered his twin brother's body to give him one as well. These birthmarks have supernatural properties, enabling those with them to sense each other's presence. 3 of Dio's sons were drawn to Pucci this way, and were used as pawns to delay Pucci's enemies. Jolene and Weather were also able to sense Pucci in order to catch up with him. Pucci eventually reached Cape Canaveral, however he still had a few days left until the new moon. But Pucci found a way around this, by reaching an understanding of Sea-Moon's abilities. Since Sea-Moon makes Pucci the center of gravity, by placing himself inside of a frame, he was able to levitate upwards. This allowed him to reach the proper position for the gravity manipulation even without the new moon. By doing this, Pucci awakened Maiden Heaven and began accelerating time. Like Dio, Pucci understood fate, and knew that the Joestars and those who support them needed to be dealt with. He wished not only to remove any possible opposition from them, but to also deny them access to heaven. However, Jolene was able to save Emporio in time, allowing him to enter the next universe. Since Jolene and the others were dead, their souls were put in a sort of limbo. Pucci shaped the new universe, stopping them from crossing over. This caused them to be replaced by counterparts of themselves. With the original plan, Pucci would allow the universe cycles to complete. However, he still needed to kill Emporio. To do this, he let time resume normally right around the meeting of Jotaro and Jolene at the prison, when he knew Emporio would be nearby. Once he had killed Emporio, Pucci would allow the cycle to complete again, and deactivate Maiden Heaven. This would then allow him, and all others throughout history, to live out their full lives within Heaven. Emporio, along with everyone else in that universe, was now aware of their fate, and the fact that it couldn't be influenced. The way that fate operates here is worth pointing out. People seem to have an internal sense of free will. They can think to themselves, and even say out loud whatever they want. However, they cannot control their movements. and are aware of future movements they are fated to take. While this is quite extreme, the system of fate ultimately hasn't changed, only people's understanding of it. Normally, people's movements are still fated, but they are unaware of it. A person can witness an action happening, and then react to it in a way that they fully believe they are choosing. However, both the action and their reaction are fated. This fated reaction is fully believable to the person as if they had chosen it. However, it is still ultimately fated. Some characters are aware of fate, and by altering it slightly can greatly complicate this sequence. However, in this case, only Pucci was able to directly alter fate in this universe, and he did not have knowledge of his own future while Maiden Heaven was active. Emporio was able to use this to his advantage, by manipulating Pucci into pushing Weather's stand disc into him. Now in any other circumstance, Emporio would not be able to do this. However, Pucci's position was unique. He had the ability to shape fate, and was still completely unaware of what the current fate would be. Emporio could see that he would have the disc in position. All he had to do was make Pucci believe that moment was when he should attack. By taking the action of pushing in the disc, Pucci changed fate. This caused fate to favor Emporio, leading to Pucci's defeat. According to Emporio, fate will always ultimately favor the path of justice. With Pucci's death, he was no longer able to control the shape of the new universe. This resulted in a new universe being created, free from Pucci's influence. It is also likely that Pucci himself does not even exist in this new universe. Much like the previous universe, the events of the past would remain mostly the same. However, the present and recent past are altered. The souls of Jolene and the others are restored, but they are given new and better lives. Emporio is now the only person left with memories of the previous universe, but he understands that the Irene of this universe is the same as the Jolene from the previous. Throughout the series, the naming convention of JOJO has highlighted the members of the Joestar bloodline. This is the same bloodline that has been fated to battle evil for over a century. Now that the final threat in this universe, Pucci, has been eliminated, there is no longer a need for this conflict. So the Jolene reborn into this universe lacks that naming convention. Instead of her and her descendants being destined to battle with Dio and his consequences, Irene's future is free to be whatever she sees fit. With this, the original universe of JOJO comes to a fitting end, with fate favoring the right path. Hopefully with this video, you reach a better understanding of Heaven, and by extension, fate in JOJO. For an in-depth look at the concept of fate, and the ways it applies to other parts, please check out my video on fate in JOJO.
Eu não sei se eu entendi perfeitamente, mas eu acho que eu queria também entender um pouco melhor como funciona assim. Aí teria que rever JOJO inteiro pra entender essa ótica. O destino, ele te condena a uma linha de não escolha, né? E será que só a família Joestar estava presa a isso? Porque ainda é meio complicado, porque, beleza, os Joestar não existem mais porque o destino deles não é mais combater o mal. Mas o destino é só isso? Eu acredito que não. Com certeza não. Mas ainda assim é algo tão abstrato sobre você está destinado a viver isso, ou a acontecer dessa forma. No outro vídeo a gente já teve uma conversa sobre isso. Aí no céu, né, no paraíso, você não tem nenhum tipo de amarra e você está com seu livre-arbítrio. Eu sei, é uma conversa muito ampla, porém, não é como se isso deixasse de existir. Porque você ainda está, entre aspas, destinado a viver uma vida onde no ambiente, no contexto que você nasceu. Sabe, eu falo português porque eu nasci no Brasil, por exemplo. né? Quem nasce no Japão provavelmente vai falar japonês. Entende? Então, meio que eu tô destinado a aprender essa língua. Eu sei que é muito longe ter essa abstração, mas eu realmente. O famoso, eu entendi, mas eu não sei se eu compreendi. Porque é tão bizarro o que o Araki faz quanto a isso, que o Made in Heaven, ele criar um universo onde ele reseta o destino, eu não sei se eu entendi. Eu não sei, eu não sei. Eu realmente, eu não sei como resolve isso. Eu entendo que é uma reflexão, eu sei que é algo muito mais reflexivo do que de fato dentro do roteiro isso, mas ainda é interessante como que o próprio Araki pode abranger essa ideia como um todo. Por isso que eu falo, beleza, o vídeo me deu uma explicação, mas eu não sei, parece que eu tô com mais dúvida do que com certezas. E eu não sei nem exatamente quais são as minhas dúvidas. Eu só tô tipo, pera, talvez eu precise de mais informações sobre. Eu não me sinto meio que completo as informações dadas em si, sabe? Não necessariamente. Exatamente, por isso que eu falei. Provavelmente, uma pessoa que nasce no país, ele vai aprender a língua nativa como o destino por ele ter nascido ali. Entende? É, é uma questão que é quase impossível de você estar livre desse destino, sabe? Por isso que a palavra destino, volto a dizer, ela é tão ampla e tão ampla que ela precisa de um contexto para ela fazer sentido. O que quer dizer um destino? Sabe? O que o Araki quer implementar de ideia em cima da palavra destino? Eu sei, teve um outro vídeo que a gente já falou sobre isso, mas eu vou ser bem sincero, eu não sei se eu compreendi completamente. Ainda é uma coisa que talvez o vídeo me deixou com mais dúvida do que com certezas. Tanto esse quanto o outro. De verdade. Eu, eu não acho que eu saí desses vídeos tipo, com um compreendimento de tudo isso. Porque daí eu precisaria entender melhor as hipóteses dentro de JOJO pra ver se essas hipóteses fazem sentido. Mas, enfim, eu vou ficar pensativo nisso e não vou ter resposta. Eu precisaria, até, sei lá, ir pro mangá ou ter um compreendimento mais profundo para entender exatamente o que é isso. Mas tudo bem. É complexo. O destino é muito mais místico do que de você. Pois é. Várias vezes e Jojo, então. Exatamente. Por isso que eu falo, cara. Ok, é uma boa introdução a esses temas, mas eu não sei se eu sair com uma tese sólida dos dois vídeos em si. Achei interessante a apresentação, mas ainda assim, não sei se eu compreendi. É o famoso. Entendi, mas não sei se compreendi. E tá tudo bem. Acontece. E é isso. Esse foi mais um vídeo. Obrigado, Alex, por ter mandado e um bom